Hi, my love. Welcome back to another episode of Radical Radiance. This one is obviously called Doing the Plot Twist Before the Plot Twist Does You. So what on earth does that mean? What does it mean to do a plot twist? How does a plot twist do us? So I'll tell you an example from my own life. And I truly was living my dream life in Sri Lanka. I had a very familiar routine. I lived 15 seconds walk from one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever seen in my entire life. I had a wonderful community of friends, people that would come and go, people that I was meeting constantly, new people. One of my favorite cafes in my life with the coffee almost as good as Melbourne, with a view looking out to the ocean, and just honestly, like, what would be my perfect daily routine if I had to say what my perfect daily routine was. So it was a dream life, and if you had told me in 2021 that I would be living that life, I wouldn't have believed you, first of all. It would have seemed far too good to be true. Unfathomably so. And I also would have had no idea, not the first clue, how. That would have been what I would have said. How on earth did I make that happen? How on earth did I end up there? And so it was a dream life. And I'm not living it anymore because of doing my own plot twist. So the thing is, life is a cyclical being. Everything goes in seasons and cycles, and there is a rhythm to everything. There's a rhythm to all those seasons and cycles. There's a rhythm to all of nature. There's a rhythm to ourselves and our own life. There's a rhythm to everything. Everything has one. Life is one big, giant, rhythmic being. She is a rhythm. And so our lives also often look like this. Our lives come in seasons and cycles and rhythms. And if there's one thing in nature that's always just never a good thing, it's stagnance. When things are stagnant, things get rotten. Things are decaying, things smell bad, there's mosquitoes, nothing's growing there, nothing is flowing there, there's no moving water, there's no new fresh growth. There's horrible creatures that feed on rotting things. And the same thing is true for our own life. But we love to skim over this detail. We love to just be like, but I'm comfortable, right? Isn't it good that I'm comfortable? I like being comfortable. I was so comfortable in my life in Sri Lanka, so comfortable. And we say things like, I've worked so hard to get here, to get this comfortable. Can I just enjoy my comfort? Like, can I just kick back and, like, does it really matter that I'm living the same day over and over again? Like, does it matter if I'm not really, like, having new experiences or learning new things? Why is that important? Why does it matter? Like, why can't I just be comfortable? Why can't I just live my life like this? And I have learned the hard way so many times in my life that life doesn't necessarily want us to just stay in one place for our entire existence. And when we try to ignore these very gentle nudges, she gives us at first, but when we try to ignore this sense that we have that maybe it's time to move on from something, maybe this job is just not going anywhere, we're just completely stagnating in a job, completely stagnating in a relationship, maybe we're really just settling, maybe we're not in a country that is helping us grow in any new ways or live our life in any interesting ways anymore. And life has ways of keeping us in rhythm, in movement, in motion, changing things, letting go of things that aren't serving us anymore, starting new things, learning new things. Life is always a cycle of life, of growth, of new things, of fresh beginnings, and then a decaying cycle. Things die, things end. It's time to move on to new things. Nothing is always growing forever. Nothing is always dying forever. And nothing is stagnating, really. Nothing good comes from there. So it's also true in our own lives too. So we need to respect that things have their own life cycle. You know, sometimes relationships have their own life cycle. Sometimes we don't stay with one person for our entire life. In fact, statistically, that doesn't really happen at all anymore. And same with jobs, same with living arrangements, same with friendships, same with connections, same with hobbies, Same with all kinds of different things in our lives. And so often it's just inconvenient to let things have a dying cycle, to let things go, to accept that maybe things just aren't growing anymore. And so if they're not growing anymore, instead of just letting them stagnate forever, it's time to let them fall away, to create space for something new to grow, to create space for new experiences, new relationships, new connections, new passions, new hobbies, new elements of your being that you've never explored before. So... And of course it's uncomfortable, right? Of course it's extremely uncomfortable to have to even admit these things to ourselves. So often we don't. Often we're just like, I'm just going to, ignore the fact that we're just having the same argument over and over and over and over and over again in this relationship, with it slowly devolving every time. And maybe things would just improve magically in the future. Or, in a workplace, we'll just overlook the fact that you're having the same mundane conversations with the same mundane people over and over and over again, and you just feel like you're bored to death, but it's a hassle to find a new job, and then you would have to meet new people, and you'd have to learn new things, and la la la. All of these kind of narratives that we tell ourselves. Because it is inconvenient. So we love to overlook these things. We love to just think that we can stick it out. And it's but it's not really ideal, but it's okay. And if it's not catastrophically wrong, why would I change it? And this is the mindset that gets us into catastrophic territory, which is what happens when life has to do the plot twist for us. And she's never doing it to be mean. She's never doing it to just give us a hard time. She's not doing it for the fun of it, But it's always to move us on, move us along. Come on, it's time for the next thing. And so and she's so gentle with us at first. The nudges are so, so gentle at first. The nudges of our health problems are always gentle at first. The nudges of issues in relationships are always gentle at first. The nudges in problems in our job or other things that we need to let go in our lives that aren't serving us anymore are normally quite gentle at first. And the more we ignore them and the more we try to just pretend that they're not there, or the more that we rationalize ourselves out of them, the louder they get. And the louder they get, and the louder they get, and the louder life gets, until she has to pull the rug completely out from underneath us. And I've experienced this so many times in my life that I can speak about this very, very, very openly and very confidently, because I've experienced it for myself, catastrophically. And it's never nice when it gets to this point. It's always for our best interest. And looking back, now I can see exactly why these things had to happen. Now I can see exactly what the message is. I can see all of the nudges. I can follow that trail of breadcrumbs from the most quietest, subtlest little hints in the back of my mind, little hints from life, getting louder and louder and louder until okay, everything's going to blow up in your face. And now what are you going to do? Now you have to start from scratch. Let's start fresh. Let's completely sweep the table so that there's nothing on there anymore. And now what are you going to do? What are you going to build? Who are you now? Have you even asked yourself that question in the last month, in the last 3 years, in the last 6 years sometimes? In my case, that was how long it was. And what do you actually want to do? Now that you've got nothing in front of you, what do you actually want to do? Those are impossible questions to answer because I've been in that situation. I know how impossible they are to answer. And this was my situation. The biggest one, the most catastrophic one in my life, the most devastating one, happened just before I turned 30, and it was an unexpected breakup where I was living with my partner in Spain. If you've listened to my podcast, you've heard this story before. We were living together in Spain. We had a dog together. I had a whole life in Spain, a whole community of people, hobbies that I was so passionate about. I was quite, not competitively, but very, very, very into trail running, training very, very intensively with friends that were also doing it. I had a job there. I had set up my own business there as well. I had my whole life there. I was planning to stay there forever. It was for the rest of my life in my mind. And then suddenly the relationship ended. And then what? So I had to pack up my whole life in Spain. I packed up my whole life. I had to try and put everything into a few suitcases, which was an unbelievably difficult task. And I had to say goodbye to all of my friends. I had to say goodbye to my job because she stayed with my partner at the time. I had to quit my job. I had to leave so many things behind and move back to Melbourne. just for a minute, I thought, just to drop my stuff and like catch up with friends and family. And I had flights booked to leave Melbourne to go to the Netherlands, which I'm glad that didn't work out. Life had my back in some ways. Yeah, she always has our back. And then of course it was the COVID lockdown. I got back in February 2020. My 30th birthday was in March 19th. And then the first big lockdown happened like a week after that, and the following week. And then a few weeks after that, they closed the international borders. My flight got cancelled. I couldn't have left even if I wanted to. So I got stuck in Melbourne. And it was a thing of like, oh my God, what on earth am I going to do? What on earth am I going to do? What do I want to do? Who even am I? What do I even like? What am I even passionate about? If I could do anything, what would it be? What kind of person am I? What kind of interest do I have? What are my values now? Because they've changed. They changed a lot in my 20s. And it took me years to figure that out, honestly. It was like not an easy process. It was a very challenging process in a very challenging situation in life, in the lockdowns, in complete upheaval. And I don't want to have that kind of plot twist in my life anymore. I want to see them coming. I want to be much, much, much more discerning, paying much, much, much more attention than I was paying. Because if I'm honest, the relationship wasn't out of the blue. There are a lot of signs. The breakup wasn't out of the blue. There are a lot of little signs and big signs leading up to that thing happening. There are a lot of challenging conversations. There are a lot of things that were like very obviously wrong and not working out, and just with no conceivable solution, but just very optimistically hoping that things would magically resolve themselves. And that was a very, very, very unpleasant plot twist to have to go through. But in hindsight, it was a complete gift. Clearing the table of everything like that was the most challenging thing that I've been through in my life, I think, but also gave me so many opportunities to start fresh and to answer those very difficult questions, like, who am I? What do I want? What sort of life do I want to live? What sort of life do I not want to live? And it gave me a chance to experiment with different things and very obviously see what I didn't want, just through living it and being like, oh, this is not it. And so now what I try to practice as much as possible is listening to these nudges ahead of time. And this is what happened in Sri Lanka. Of course it was a dream life. Of course it was so comfortable. And of course I had so much resistance to these nudges. They started coming up very, very, very small breadcrumbs of like just, and generally it starts as a niggling voice in your mind that we're very quick to dismiss. Of like, are you learning anything new? Like, are you growing at all? Is anything new happening? Is there any room for like novelty or uncertainty or unpredictable things in your life? Because that's always where the magic surprises of life come in. When we engineer our life so much that there's none of that, we lose a lot of magic in our life. And I had engineered my life so much there was almost no room for those kind of things, apart from the people I was meeting, which luckily were life-changing people, some of them, and some of them reflected these things to me as well, which was, you are stagnating. What growing are you doing? What are you learning? In what ways are you evolving as a person? Your life is very, very beautiful, but you're not growing. You're not growing. And so, of course, I was like, ugh. Well, why does it matter? I worked hard to get here. I love this life. This is my dream life. Why would I change it? Why on earth would I change it? But then the breadcrumbs kept coming and I kept paying attention, and just slowly, I've learned this about myself. Like, we don't have to change things suddenly. In fact, it's better if we don't change things suddenly normally, because we give ourselves more of a chance to explore things. We give ourselves, it's less pressure, so we can be more playful, we can be more curious, and it's always better things unfold when we're under less pressure and when we can be more playful and curious. And we also get a chance to very intentionally build ourselves into a person that can hold a bigger life, that can hold more things, that can hold more uncertainty, that can hold different types of opportunities, that can build up a skill set that allows us to do things that we maybe couldn't do before. So having these catastrophic, big, unpredictable, rapid changes if we can avoid them, is always better because we get a chance to be much more intentional, much more creative. So this was what was happening. This was the process. And it was just, again, just little nudges. What if it was time to move on? Where would you go? What would you want to do? In what way would you want to grow? And of course it was terrifying, right? I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know how I was going to afford it. I didn't know, like, what the next chapter would look like. I didn't know any of those things. There was a lot of uncertainty. And this is the thing, like, we always want a guarantee before we make a change. We always want to know that it's going to work out. We always want to know exactly how it's going to, unfold. So that we can still kick back in that comfortable feeling of like, oh yeah, it's okay, we've got it all sorted. We know exactly what's going to happen. And this is the thing, of course it's nice to know those things. Of course it feels comfortable to know those things. But when we wait until we have 100% certainty on these things, we never move. We never move. Because there's never 100% certainty, right? It's always a risk. It's always a gamble. And in my life, the biggest risks that I've taken have always been the ones with the most extraordinary, unfathomable rewards. I could never in my million years have guessed how beautifully they were going to turn out. So we have to take the leap with only a little bit of certainty sometimes, with only 10%, maybe 50% if we're lucky, maybe a little bit more if we're lucky, but it's very rarely 100%. So when we sit around waiting for 100%, for 90%, even 80% certainty, we're never going to change. We're never going to make the change. Because when we do the plot twist before the plot twist does us, when we can listen to the nudges from life ahead of time, when we can get intentional about what we want to create, it gives us this opportunity to collaborate with life. It gives us an opportunity to be very intentional about what we might want to do, or at least very intentional about in what ways we might like to grow and evolve. And then we either get to experiment, we get to see what life brings us, or we get to pick something and take action in that way and just see what happens. And that's a beautifully creative process. That gives us a lot of creative power. That gives us a lot of room to be playful and curious and experimentative. Is that a word? And then it's a very, very, very fun collaboration with life, because sometimes we think we know what we are creating, and then sometimes life brings us something even better. And sometimes there's a tangent that we go down. Sometimes there's a person that we meet that shows us a different path that we didn't even know existed. That's 1,000 times better than what we could have had. Sometimes we find our own path and we're walking down it, and then we get to the end and it's not what we expected. And sometimes we get to the end and it is what we expected. And then we've grown into somebody that then is like, okay, now that I've done that thing, now there's actually a lot of other doors that's open for me that I get to explore. Do you know what I mean? When we wait until life has to do the plot twist for us, it's almost always just a clean slate swipe. It's almost always just removing everything. And this exact same thing just happened to my brother as well, which is ironic that it's very much following my footsteps of what happened. Same thing, he moved abroad to be with a partner. And the same thing, it was like slowly stagnating. And then with this thing of like, maybe we can just ignore that this is happening. And then again, like just this thing of like, no, you've left Australia. So that's a huge step in an amazing direction, right? And maybe the fact of the relationship, part of it was just to get that impulse to get out of Australia, to see how big the world is, to see what incredible things are out there outside of your own neighborhood. And then, yeah, it's like a thing of, okay, this is not serving you anymore, but you're not moving. Why are you not moving? Let me nudge you, just gently. Oh, you're still not moving. What if I nudge you in a different way? Okay, still not moving. Okay, what if I nudge you a little bit more forcefully? Oh, you're still not moving. Okay, what can I do? And that's, I think, how the process is. And then the more we don't move, the louder it has to be. The bigger the health catastrophe we have, the more catastrophic the breakup is. We lose our job, we lose our home, some sort of disaster happens, some sort of big health scare happens, some sort of other random, completely random, seemingly completely random thing happens where we are just forced to make a big change in our life. And those are the moments where it's just like emptying everything to start again from scratch. So if we don't want to empty everything to start again from scratch to then have to answer those questions, we can reverse engineer this. Start asking these questions ahead of time. Start asking yourself, who am I? What do I want? What have I outgrown? What am I currently just settling for in my life? Because that's the thing. We often, so often, make a very critical error. We mistake comfort. No, we mistake stagnance for comfort. And we think that we're so comfortable. We think that it's glorious. We're so comfortable. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to put any effort. Don't have to do any new things. I don't have to meet any new people. I don't have to start any new hobbies. I don't have to get a new job. I don't have to get a new partner. Like, everything is just good enough. Everything is just okay. I don't have to do any of these new things. But why would you ever want to live like that? Why would you ever want to just settle for mediocrity? Why would you ever want to just sink into that molasses of the same? It's a swamp sometimes. And we try and make it pretty. We try and soothe ourselves by saying that it's comfortable. Just because it's comfortable and we make it look pretty doesn't mean that it's not a swamp, that it's not stagnant, right? And people will sometimes say, there's always like counter arguments to this of like, yeah, but what, like, you know, we're supposed to just be content with what we have. Like, why would you always need to be changing things? Why do you need to do new things all the time? Why can't we just stay the way that we are? You know, there's no need to just like change for the sake of change. We should just be practicing contentment. But is it really contentment if there is that niggling voice in the back of your head telling you, are you sure this is it? Are you sure? Are you sure this is what you were meant to do in your life? Are you sure this is as good as your life can get? Because now looking back, and the times when I also did this on purpose to myself, when I pulled my own rug from out from underneath myself, when I did my own plot twist, when I left Melbourne to book a one-way flight to Indonesia, not knowing anything and having to leave a lot of things behind, having to leave jobs and friendships and relationships behind that were okay, you know, they were lovely, but I wasn't growing in them anymore. And they were comfortable. They were so comfortable. They were so comfortable that I could have lived my whole life like that. Do you know what I mean? I could have. I could have easily, in fact. But there was that niggling voice in the back of my head being like, are you sure this is it? Are you sure that this is as good as it gets? What do you actually want? Be real with yourself. Be honest with yourself. Even if it means that you're going to have to unlock a very big, terrifying, completely terrifying Pandora's box of what do you actually want? Because it is terrifying. When you start asking that question, you start giving yourself the responsibility to create whatever it is that you actually genuinely want. If you never ask yourself the question, you never have to face that thing. You never have to have that conversation with yourself. You never have to actually start answering then the other questions that come along with that of, now what then? How are you going to live a comfortably stagnant life if you started asking those questions? So that's the thing. You can settle. You can settle for a mediocre life. And the thing is, it felt pretty good for me at that moment. The relationship was pretty good. The job wasn't that good, but like it paid my bills. The friendships were pretty good. My apartment was pretty nice. My life was pretty nice. You know, it was nice. It wasn't extraordinary. Could I have lived in pretty nice? Yeah, of course I could have. Of course I could. Of course I could have. And we get into this trap then where we end up trapping ourselves in a cycle where we have to keep working more and more and more to buy more and more and more things to make our life nicer, to treat ourselves more, because actual life itself is not that enjoyable. And then the more we work to earn more money, to spend it on more things, to treat ourselves more. And then we have to work more because then we buy more expensive things and more elaborate things. And then it's a very, very, very vicious cycle. I was in that cycle as well. And things were pretty nice. But looking back now, from where I am now, looking back on that, things got a million times more extraordinary than what I thought was pretty decent, you know? It was decent. The things that I've experienced in these last few years have completely changed my life in ways that I could never, ever have fathomed. The way that I feel inside of myself, the way that I am in my being, the joy that I have in my life, the fulfillment that I have, the sheer pleasure of being alive, the delight of being alive, the things that I've learned, the people that I have met. I cannot even imagine having settled in something that was pretty nice and having missed out on all of those things. And in that moment, I was like, maybe it doesn't get that much better than this, you know? Little did I know. Little did I know. And that's the thing, right? Because it is comfortable. It's fine. It's okay. And it is scary. It's scary to change things. It is uncomfortable to not know what the answers are and to have to take the leap of faith anyway, trusting that life is going to catch us and trusting that we're going to catch ourselves and trusting that we'll be able to figure it out, that we're going to grow the skills necessary. And when we have these things that come into our mind that say, what if I never meet someone better? What if I never find a better job? What if I never figure it out? What if I'm never happy? What if I never discover what I truly love to do? What if I never discover what I'm passionate about? Those are huge red flags. And they mean that you don't trust yourself and you don't trust life. You don't trust that you're going to figure it out together collaboratively. And if that's the case, there's plenty of other episodes you can go and listen to about building this sense of trust in life and in yourself. It's the most transformative thing that you can do. So, to do the plot twist before the plot twist does you, ask yourself 2 questions. The first one is, what do I actually love? What am I passionate about? What do I actually want to do? What would be an extraordinary adventure for me? If my life was a movie, what would just be like a really fun, cool plot twist? What's something that you can't stop talking about, that you can't stop thinking about? Every single conversation you've had with every person this last week, what have you been saying? What's something that you just obsess over? What kind of podcasts have you been listening to? What kind of books? What kind of thing is just utterly fascinating to you at the moment? That's a step in the right direction. That's something to unpack more of. And the other thing is, what is something that you could up-level yourself in, a skill, qualities of the way that you are, new experiences that would challenge you in new ways to become more confident or braver or, up-level some element of yourself, some element of your being, some quality, some value, some skill, some knowledge that you could do, something that you could learn on purpose that would unlock plenty of doors for you that currently are closed because you don't have that skill. So this is how I did my own plot twist. I left Sri Lanka, even though I didn't want to, even though I could have happily stayed there for another 2 years, just happily stagnating. It would have been a very happy stagnation, but it wouldn't have been growth. It wouldn't have been evolution. And I, luckily for myself, have this insatiable curiosity to see what else is out there. What happens next when I up-level myself? What happens next in my life? And I'm lucky because I can look back on my life, like this moment where things were pretty good in Melbourne, and see, wow, look at all these things I would have missed out on. And I did the same exercise with my life in Sri Lanka. It was pretty nice, but at a whole other standard. Now my level of pretty nice is like what would have been a 10 out of 10 for me back in Melbourne. It was nice. It was lovely. But what things was I missing out on? Because I wasn't up-leveling, because I wasn't taking new risks, because I wasn't putting myself out there and challenging myself in new ways. So I decided I'm going to do a plot twist. I am going to do a plot twist. I am going to leave, knowing that I can go back if I really want to as well. Because we can almost always go back. We almost always never will. And knowing that there's 1,000 million new adventures waiting for me out there that I can't even conceive of yet. So I asked myself that question, what's something that I'm really passionate about? Of course, my movement practices are always one of my biggest passions, always. And my Ashtanga yoga in that moment was just something that I really, really was loving. So that was the answer to one question. And the answer to the next question was, how would I up-level myself in a way that would unlock doors for me? And the answer to that question was to get much more comfortable holding space for big groups of people. I'm always in awe of all of my friends in Hirikatia that do that, in anybody that I meet, any classes that I go to. So in awe of people that can teach a yoga class in a beautiful way, with a beautiful, inspiring manner, holding space in a beautiful, calm, grounded way that lets people explore things that they've never explored before, that lets people have beautiful experiences. I'm always very envious of people when I'm always so appreciative, I have so much respect for it. And I would always look at them and be like, you will never be like that. You could never be like that. So then I was like, okay, what do I need to learn to be able to be like that then? How can I up-level myself in a way where I can hold space like that, where I could teach a class like that, where I could share my gifts, my things that I'm so passionate about with people in a different way? And that those two things put together were my answer. My plot twist was going to be to do a yoga teacher training. And I knew it was going to be so uncomfortable. I'm so uncomfortable being perceived in front of big groups of people. With, of course, good reason. You know, I was like, I have the whole story of why that's uncomfortable, but so what? Why can I not learn it as a skill and up level? We can always learn things as a skill and up level. So that's what I did. I packed up all of my stuff in Sri Lanka, put it all in a big suitcase that I sent back to Melbourne, and a rucksack, a big rucksack that I have with me now. And I did the plot twist. I went to Goa, stayed there for 5 or 6 weeks. I was there a little bit before the training. I did the training. It was extraordinary. It was life-changing. I learned so much about myself. I learned that I love holding space for big groups of people, which was just an extraordinary discovery. I would never have discovered that if I didn't do this plot twist to myself. And there are so many doors open to me now. I'm rearranging my whole life around this now, you know? And it's bringing so many new things into my life. I haven't even started teaching yoga yet. And it's already changed my life. It's already changing the questions that I'm asking myself when I think about what I want to do next, when I think about what kind of life I want to have, when I think about what kind of impact I want to have, when I think about what kind of ways I would love to be more in the flow of life and give more back and learn new things and receive new gifts. And it's all cycles, right? It's all cycles. But it's very, very hard to do cycles when we're stuck stagnating in a swamp. I know that this might make you feel uncomfortable, this podcast episode. But if you are feeling uncomfortable, first of all, I'm sending you a big hug. Because it's hard. It is hard. It is hard. It is uncomfortable. But let these nudges and this discomfort be signs or clues even, breadcrumbs, that you are on the precipice of something extraordinary. And it is going to require you probably to have a leap of faith, to jump without knowing yet how well-formed your wings are. But understanding that of course you're going to grow your wings as you go down. Of course life is going to catch you on her currents. The beautiful different winds that are going to carry us to different places. And of course you get to say, we get to be so creative. We get to have so much input in this collaboration with life. And we get to be so open to how many extraordinary, unpredictable, magical surprises she has for us. So you get to do the plot twist before the plot twist does you. You get to trust yourself. You get to build yourself into an extraordinary person that can have extraordinary experiences in this life. And even if life is pretty good now, I promise you, you can get 1,000 times more extraordinary in ways that you can't even imagine. So go and think about what your plot twist might be. And if you're brave enough to do it, I promise you will unlock an extraordinary amount of treasure in your life. Love you.